So welcome everyone. Thank you very much for coming to this webinar, or if you're watching back on recording, which I don't blame you if you're a busy teacher and you've had lots of things to do today, then welcome. I'm really pleased to invite Paula, who is now a great friend of Empathy Week as well, having discovered us a couple of years ago. And really this is very different to the sessions that we run as an introduction. This is really a chance for you to learn about how a head teacher, current head teacher with her school, is actually using Empathy Week and then interlacing it amongst all the other things that you have to do day to day. And so it's going to actually be less of me speaking, which is good for everyone, and more of Paula. But I will just quickly introduce. So Paula is the head teacher of Reid Street Primary School up in the north of England in Darlington. They started in 2021, I believe, and they actually won the Global Empathy Award for the outstanding primary school that year. And then also we have had the pleasure of visiting Reid Street this summer, I don't know which to say, and coming to see the school in action and how they integrate empathy into their working school life. So Paula, thank you very much for coming for this webinar. Thank you for giving us your time. And I'm sure lots of teachers that maybe have come across Empathy Week or experienced a little bit of what we do and haven't taken part before will be keen to hear from you a really honest approach of how you've used it. And before we just go into that, I would like to say that we do have a structure. Do come to the introduction webinars, and we do have like a very clear structure that you can follow. But of course, having been teachers ourselves, we know that every school can use it in a different way. And this is just how Paula's school, Reid Street, have used Empathy Week. So Paula, welcome, and please tell us about your amazing school.
Okay, so I was just saying to Ed that I've gone kind of old school. So rather than do a presentation, I thought I'll just talk you through how we came across it, how we then kind of got involved in the first time that we used Empathy Week, and then when we've taken it from there. I am going to hopefully pepper what I say with good reasons why you would join Empathy Week and take part. And so I am going to use some of those buzzwords that will drive you all a bit mad when you get them, because they're always at the front of the emails, because they know those are the ones that you'll open. But actually, they are all really relevant. I will just start off with kind of something that you might have seen in the video that we did when Ed came to visit, which was why wouldn't you? You know, you take a look around at what's happening. I'm absolutely not going to get political, but you just look around at leadership, you know, in this country and abroad. You know, more empathy is absolutely something that we need, and if we can have that empathy generation and we're the start of that, then hopefully things can only improve in terms of how people deal with each other. So just as Ed was saying, we kind of, you know, got on board with it. I watched a lockdown webinar with SSAT. Looking desperately in the midst of what was the pandemic and schools disruption, and we'd been in a school, we'd been out to school, and I was looking for something that would just help us, give us a focus to rebuild our community a bit. I felt that we'd become a little bit disparate through lockdown. We'd had children who were in school, children who weren't able to be in school, and I just was looking for something that would give us a way just to kind of hang our culture and vision and ethos, but bring it back into the fore and then develop it even further. So lots of you will be aware of the work of Barry Carpenter around the recovery curriculum. And this was something that very much appealed to us, particularly the first two, which was around relationships and community. And so I was busy thinking about how that could be something we could use when I came across Ed presenting at Empathy Week, and I thought, aha, this is how we can pull it all together. We have a very strong community. We're a community school, but we did feel that we had lost a little bit of that because of COVID, but also that our demographic was changing subtly. If you went back, I've been at this school for more than 20 years, and I remember a time when we were very uni-ethnic and we didn't have really a diverse set of families and pupils in school, and that had changed over time. And we'd done lots of work to support cultures and diversity and understanding, but I didn't feel we'd really embedded that work around understanding each other. So at the same time, we had children's mental health was a big issue and continues to be. And the theme for Mental Health Week was express yourself. which tallied perfectly with Empathy Week and the work that we could do around that, but also with an event that was happening in the north around the Northern European Languages Project, which was looking at the fact that actually we're a very diverse community in the Northeast now. So we pulled all of those things together in one project. So that was this is our project, and it's within a book creator. And we found out all sorts about our children that we didn't know before. So we rebuilt our community on genuine understanding, and they shared information about themselves, their culture, their beliefs, their passions. We didn't know all of this stuff before. And some of it children were working on at home, some of it they were working on in school, but it all came together in a collective understanding that actually this is something that really matters to us. So a huge amount of passion went into that project. And it did exactly what we wanted it to do. Children were able to express themselves, whether that was expressing anxiety and concern about what had been happening to them around the disruption, or whether that was expressing the joy and pride they have in their own community, or with their culture that they wanted to share with us. And so the whole thing came together in a real kind of understanding of what it means to be a Reid Street pupil. You know, we call ourselves a family. We do have a new one that I'll finish with if I forget. Remind me at the end, Ed. So we met these people in our first Empathy Week and just were struck. I mean, you know, it should have come with a warning from Ed, I think, for the first one. I watched the premieres one Thursday evening and found myself in tears listening to some of these stories. I thought, oh, I really could have done with a trigger warning there. And then I was slightly concerned that we were a primary school and these were really hard-hitting stories, but was very much reassured that when the films are edited, they do become absolutely age appropriate, and that was definitely what happened. And just these people really had an impact on our children. So we were able to watch films being introduced to people they'll never meet, but they found out and started to understand that all of these people had different experiences, just like they'd had different experiences. But the things that really struck them were really fascinating. They were amazed with the conversation that Shu had around how difficult it is to come from another culture and open your packed lunch to find that actually your food is very different from the children around you, and how that makes you feel when you're trying to be that person that works in two different cultures. And the children were fascinated by that because it really hit home with them. They could empathize, they could imagine what must that be like if I'm opening up my packed lunch and it's totally different to everybody else's. You know, you think about the things that are happening culturally around us, you know, whether it's Black Lives Matter or whether it's Me Too, so much of this stuff was tapping in to difficult conversations, and they're hard conversations to have with primary school pupils and with secondary school pupils, pitching that just right. But actually, there was a lot in here that really gave us those opportunities to do that. You know, just thinking about some individuals, you know, we were very struck with Pete, who'd lost his dad, and, you know, the hard-hitting bit around the suicide, that wasn't covered in the Key Stage 2 one, absolutely appropriately. But we've had a pupil recently who've lost their father, and he's died sadly of cancer. And she remembers Pete and his story and the positives about what he used to help him overcome his grief. And that's something that's really struck her. One that really stayed with us was Habib. And, you know, deeply, deeply moving story about the life of a refugee and the experiences. We now have 3 Ukrainian refugee pupils in Reid Street. And because we've done that work around a story with somebody we didn't know, we've got a lot more understanding in our community and our pupils around the experiences of those refugees and what that means. So that's had such an impact in terms of how our children deal with each other. This was a Khan quote that I'm just going to read for you. There are 3 ways of trying to win the young: persuasion, compulsion, and attraction. You can preach at them, that's a hook without a worm. You can say you must volunteer, and that's of the devil. And you can tell them you are needed. That appeal hardly ever fails. And this is something that Ed and I had quite a few conversations around, because how do we get our children to feel that they are agents of change? That it's not sympathy that we're looking for. You know, if you want to watch the Brene Brown, there's a fabulous YouTube clip where she says it's not sympathy that's needed in the world, it's empathy. And there is a difference, and you know, there's a lovely little cartoon that explains that difference. But that's quite difficult when you're in Key Stage 2 particularly. How can you change the world? How can you be empowered to feel that you're making a difference? And actually Empathy Week is exactly the thing that can give you that. curriculum. So I said, I'm going to talk about the kind of key things, you know. Everybody is talking about curriculum at the moment. You know, everybody is reviewing their curriculum. You might be looking at it from a point of view of decolonizing your curriculum, or you might be looking to bring in that sense of agency and that positivity after there's lots of negativity around catch up and lost learning and all of those sorts of things that we're hearing about. Actually, our children feel very positive about the future, and we want to tap into that. But if you've come across, and I'm sure you have, Deborah Kidd's work, The Curriculum of Hope, and particularly Hal Roberts' work on botheredness. And this is, I've just seen this, his book's coming out. I don't get anything for this. But if you've ever come across his work, he talks about moving away from children who are engaged to children who are bothered. And he tells a lovely story about teaching something very dry, which is coastal erosion. But I hadn't realized at the time when I was watching it, but what he's doing it, he's teaching it through the form of empathy. And the whole subject he wraps around in an empathic or empathetic feel for an old man who's living in a little cottage he's always lived with his wife, but it's perched on the edge of a cliff because coastal erosion is going to take that away from him. And just that, teaching it that way, teaching geography with that amount of empathy, that's what's going to get our kids really involved and bothered, as Hal would say. So we turned our school development plan into a visual school development plan. And Ed saw last year's when he came up. We've replaced that obviously because we do one every year. But what we've made sure is that empathy is writ large in our new school development plan. So this comes back to those conversations that you hear people say about live not laminated, that it's got to be part of a culture and an ethos. Empathy it's like growth mindset and all the other things. You don't do one assembly on it and then think that that's it, you've done your piece of work. Yes, you might want an assembly that starts it all off, that talks about the films that you're going to see, but actually it's got to be something that you live day in and day out, and you talk about a lot with your pupils, and that's very much where we're at with our pupils. So it's a big key part of our school development plan. Thinking about curriculum, one of the big things that you can't get away from now is sustainability. Now that might be that you want to think about turning your lights off and saving on heating, but actually it's also going to be about the curriculum. We all know coming our way is a sustainability curriculum. We do lots of work around the 17 global goals, the sustainability development goals. And alongside there comes a set of characters for primary school. And we use these characters a lot in our teaching, and our favorite is Akani, empathy. And you see that Akani has these funny shoes because he walks in the shoes of others. He thinks about something, you know, and again, it strikes me a conversation that I heard Ed say in the first ever meeting. I've heard him speak, and it's the story about, you know, somebody who is homeless and he goes to buy a sandwich for, but actually the thing he does that he thinks is the most helpful isn't necessarily what that person needs. And so we do a lot of work in school about, again, it's not sympathy, and it is kindness, but it's more than that. It's learning, going into action. What can we do about this? Given that, you know, we have limited resources or we're only young, there are still things that we can do. So if you haven't started doing the work around your curriculum, around those global goals and the explorers that go with, I really recommend them, because they're going to be a great way into ticking lots of boxes in the most appropriate and right way. One of the other things that is brilliant about empathy is it's global. This is a picture that we use a lot with our children, and this is an aerial view of our school. And you can see how kind of landlocked and you know, we don't have a field. So there's no green area in Reid Street. We were built well over 100 years ago, where those things weren't considered. We don't have a car park for staff, but we do have lots of fabulous things, and we have a huge pride in our area. And we talk to children that we can make our school even better through empathy, but we can also do that in our local area, and then we can bring that out to the northeast. We can do that right across the country, and actually it's global. We can make a difference right across the whole world. And because you're looking at people's stories from all over the world, that really reinforces that. It gives children opportunities to do that sort of thing. This is our children talking to Ed and judges and children from schools in Mexico and lots of other places all around Nigeria. And our children were just amazed that actually they were doing something that connected them to children who were also doing something. around the same kind of project. And it just gave them a real sense of connectedness with people right across the world of various different ages in terms of the children. Judges from America and from London, and places that really don't mean a huge amount to some of our children, but they just really felt connected. Just a plug for Empatico, because again, that's linked with empathy, and that gives you those opportunities. If you want to link up with children across the country or globally, where your children can actually meet other children and do associated projects, and again, come to understand people. And it's through understanding that we can think about the best ways to help people. I've got this one because use of technology, you might be, the people watching this might be the people who were already streets ahead of using tech in schools when lockdown hit. We weren't. So we had a massive learning curve of how on earth are we going to do all of this remote teaching. Once we'd got past the pain of that, we're very determined not to lose that, because a lot of the work we did in our first empathy project, it came through technology that we'd learned how to use, and children were able to send in films and videos and bits of writing and pictures of the work that they'd done, and we could collate all of that. So we use Book Creator, we use Wakelet, we use all sorts of different ways where children can actually share. And I just stole this one, I thought it's lovely. This is when we were the next empathy year, when we were looking at passion and purpose. And we've got children here, we've got a child who's expressing herself through reading, and that's her passion, and someone who's really into soundtracks and show tunes, and that's something that they're really passionate about. So that was lovely as well. You'll have seen the work of Rachel D'Souza, who's the Children's Commissioner, and last year she did what they called the Big Ask, and they asked children and young people right across the whole country, what is it that you want? How do you see the future? What do you think we should do to change things? And it was absolutely amazing to see the answers that came out of that. This is a quote from them. It's overall, children described an ambitious, socially conscious, reforming vision of the world they want to live in. Rather than being divided on these issues across all identity groups, children were united. They want the same things. Simply, children value a society where all can succeed. So that passion that children have, that you see in adults seems sometimes a little bit lacking, they have that determination to understand other people and to work together, even with people you don't agree with, finding ways to find common ways forward. When it came to things like the world of work, so if you were secondary listening to this, you already have the Gatsby benchmarks, you've got a set of criteria that you absolutely have to meet in terms of how you're doing your careers education. But if you're in primary school, that is becoming increasingly important as well. There's a lot of research out there that tells you that children's gender biases around work are already embedded by the time they're age 4 and they come into reception. But it also was fascinating in the Big Ask, because children talked about the fact that they want to get on and do well, they want to work hard, and they spoke in terms of jobs and careers, often civic-minded careers. So one thing that really came across from that is we need to really promote with children opportunities, not just to get a good job and earn lots of money, but to actually get a good job that has purpose. I wasn't going to necessarily talk about this, but I've got it in front of me. I read this in the summer, Happiness by Design. And it's a fabulous book, and it explains that happiness is not tripping around in life happy all the time, because nobody's like that. It's the thing that you need is a sense of purpose. That's actually what genuinely makes people happy. And children, I think, have recognized that the work that they want to do in the future, they want it to be something that really makes a difference. And Empathy Week, Passion and Purpose really brought that out. We were able to talk to our children about what do you want to be when you grow up, but who do you want to be? How do you want to be in the workplace? And all of that work linked together around Empathy Week. So when we watched the films and we met these fabulous people, and again, just totally inspired our children. There was so much that our children could talk about. You look at Lipa, and this was before the Lionesses did their amazing work around football this year. She had already talked about overcoming so much to be able to play football because it meant so much to her. It was her passion and her purpose. We had lots of children deciding they're going to do some rapping. So very much inspired by Crosby there. In terms of PSHE, anti-bullying messages, that comes across. Yes, we're tackling things like, you know, racism that people have experienced and so on. But then, you know, when you have stories about bullying and where that comes from, that ties in absolutely with all the work we do. We've just had, we're coming up getting ready for Anti-Bullying Week. And the empathy work absolutely tallies and ties in with that. So your PSHE, a huge amount of it can come out of these people's stories. Thinking still about employment, we did a Careers and Aspirations Week. And as I said, we linked it not just to how can you get a good career, but how can you make a positive difference in the world through the careers that you're going to be doing in the future. And we had a virtual meeting with this lady, Baroness Findlay of Llandaff, who's in the House of Lords, and we thought it's going to be quite dry, and you know, we'll sit through and we'll tick a box and say we've spoken to somebody from there. Turns out she's a passionate believer in empathy, and she spent a whole of her life working in health services across the world, trying to improve things for vulnerable people. And you know, the children asked us some really difficult questions, including things like, what laws are you most proud of that you've made a difference to? And they were very much empathic things that she spoke about. She's one of the people that made sure we've got an emergency EpiPen in school that we're allowed to use and things like this. So really kind of surprised, but because the children took that tack with her, it was a really worthwhile event. Use your ex-pupils, your alumni. So we have people like this. This is a child I taught in year 6 many years ago. And he zoomed in and has done some sessions with us in Aspirations Week, but also he's taught some science lessons because he now works with Nobel Prize winners and was commandeered to work on the coronavirus during the pandemic. So he's gone on to do a job, and he explained to the children how everything he learned through Reid Street and then through the rest of his career, he's now using that to do something that really makes a difference in the world. And that really inspired them. We had an editor come in, and he was a journalist, but rather than talk about journalism, you know, you get that salacious story and it's great. And, you know, he talked about campaigning journalism and actually how you can use your job to make a real difference. And there was a huge campaign around a friend of his who worked in the same newspaper had died of a heart condition when people in France weren't dying of that heart condition. And so he did a campaign to make sure that the right tests and the right procedures were available to people in the Northeast. And as it says there, 20 years after that campaign, people's lives are still being saved. And so the children again saw this whole process of you find something that you're passionate about, and then you find a way to do something about it. We had an absolutely fabulous, so coming back to Habib, because we were very conscious of our refugees who'd come and joined us in school, and we'd already done that work around watching Habib's film. We had a lady from Coventry Refugee and Migrant Centre who zoomed in and did a careers talk with our older children, and she very much countered again the stereotypes that you might hear in some newspapers about refugees and migrants, and she gave them the actual facts about the difference between those two things and actually what is available to support them over here. And that was an absolute, and again, she was sharing that she has a passion and a purpose in her life, and she's helping people genuinely. And we could see how we could do that on our small scale in school. So that was fabulous. And we linked that, as Ed knows, with, you know, we had little Amal, who's the Syrian puppet who's walked from Syria right across the whole of Europe, including over to here, and was on stage with Elbow at Glastonbury to spread the message about refugee children. And that really struck a chord with our children, because again, that idea of walking in the shoes, that really kind of fitted with them. The cool person, that was James, and that fabulous film. So we all have statutory objectives we have to put on our websites, as you know, for every school, and your equality objectives is one of them. And so that looking at the positives and challenging the negatives around discrimination and around disability awareness, this film really helped us to do that. And we've got children who have brothers and sisters who have disabilities and have special educational needs. But that really, the positivity of this film just oozed out and gave us something really that we feel we can build a year's worth of our objectives around that kind of positive approach. senior leaders. So, you know, whoever's watching this, you might be teachers, you might be department leads, or you might be senior leaders, and just working with, there's a lot of research, and all you need to know is you're looking at these two different colors that tell you empathic leadership makes a difference. You know, our staff have gone through a really tough few years. If we can build empathy as adults working in a school with each other, it's going to be a much happier workplace and a much more productive workplace. So it absolutely makes sense. And there's an awful lot of research out there that supports lots of different elements of empathy and why it works, and that's one of them. One of the people, you know, you might be thinking, why she got a thing about Pokemon? Sometimes just if you inspire, we've inspired a whole school and we get the whole school involved. But when you see the difference it makes to one particular child, that really kind of stays with you. And this pupil who's in the Passion and Purpose project is a pupil he has a diagnosis of autism. He's really struggled with school for a long time. And he particularly detests writing. So if there's an extended writing session, we'll often, you know, we would have found him in the corridor, refusing to go into the classroom because he just wasn't going there. The fear of the blank page was just too much for him and he couldn't get past it. And then he asked if for the empathy project, he could share his passion with Pokemon. And we said, well, yes, do a little bit of writing, share that with other people. I looked at it today and it's 23 pages long now because there's no end to it. Because of the way Book Creator works, he can keep adding to that. So he's moved up a year group and he's still adding to that project, sharing the passion of Pokemon with everybody. And he sits down at the computer and just chooses to write all about something he's passionate about. He's also now our vice president of our Rota Kids, because he's got a real taste for making a difference in the world. And so he's involved with all of our charities and all of the other things that we do. I left it till last because it's the last reason why we ever do anything, but it's Ofsted. So we don't come to work to please Ofsted. Nevertheless, we can't ignore it, and it does make a difference. And we had our inspection at a really challenging time. We'd had a lot of staff absence because of COVID. We'd had a really tough year this year, earlier in the year, so not the academic year, the actual year, January onwards. And we were very tired, and along they came, and they totally understood what we're trying to do. And that empathy, if one child spoke to them about empathy, many children did. So they got the message very clearly. And this is the first paragraph of our Ofsted report that came out, and it says, Reid Street pupils' values of respect, equality, independence and diversity thread through pupils' daily experiences. Pupils understand why these values are vital to helping everyone. They enjoy choosing charities to raise money to help others. Pupils understand and value, and it's quoted, walking in the shoes of others. So it even made its way into our Ofsted report. And she gave us a lovely comment, the inspector, when she spoke to us and gave us feedback, that we had somehow created a village school on a much larger scale. And that really stayed with us because that's exactly what we're trying to do. But that village in the sense of a connected village and connected right out to the whole world. Just want to finish with where we're going to go. We've got some interesting ideas about what we're going to do with our project this year. We're looking forward to the new films. We are acutely aware of cost of living issues with our parents. We come from quite a deprived area. We've got much higher than average pupil premium grant eligibility and so on. So what we're very cautious about not doing is constantly looking to parents to raise money. For all the children love to do money raising things because they get their teeth into particular charities. We've raised money for guide dogs through our empathy work. We've put a bench in the local dean that brings happiness to people. We've done all sorts that has cost. But we're determined this year that it's not going to be something that actually means it's going to cost money, but we are going to change the world. We're just going to do it in a way that's not about raising money. We've got some other interesting ideas, and we're really looking forward to the films and how we can tap in and tie into the themes that come out of those. And that's me.
Paula, wow. I mean, I've heard things there that I didn't know before as well, that from the school. And I think that's, you know, without me, you know, saying too much about Empathy Week from my own perspective, but hearing those stories back really does, I think, show that how it can impact every child in a different way, in a positive way. And I think what we're really clear on moving forward as an organization ourselves is that it has to evoke behavior change.
Yeah.
It cannot just be inspirational. It cannot just be cool. It cannot just be like fun, and it cannot just save time, although we aim to do all these things in the package. It is about creating real behavior change. And you've seen our Cambridge research that we've done, which is great, because now schools can know that we're actually research led and research backed, in the sense of what we're doing and what the program does help change behavior in a positive way. But I also love how you've just really outlined, without maybe meaning to, the fact that empathy isn't about raising money for charity. It's a skill that is developed, and it's about actually how we connect with other people and how we can change the world in a way that doesn't involve money. And I think that's a great challenge to put, because students often do go to that place of, let's raise money, let's help people. But actually, sometimes that means there's less understanding about what the actual problems and solutions are of who we're trying to help. And I'm really excited to see what Reid Street do. One thing I did want to ask, I'm conscious of time, but one quick thing I did want to ask is, we run the program, and this year we're going to have a week of events. So there's going to be events for parents, teachers, and students that we haven't had before. So some live assemblies, some talks to help parents maybe with their children, some sort of CPD type talks and workshops and panels for teachers, which is amazing. And we're saying to run the program, the 5 films, start an Empathy Week and run them over 5 weeks. Now, we always aim to enable schools to use this in pastoral time or registration time, or time that you have with your students, to make it as easy and possible for every school to take part. But there is also flexibility there as well. And I just wanted to ask, how does Reid Street use it? And how has that changed from obviously the first year where you're dipping your toe in the water to now Ofsted report, and looking to your 3rd year? How has that changed for you, and how do you actually use the program itself?
So I think, one of the things to say is that package of support has massively improved, even over the short time that we've been involved. So it was, I remember having conversations with you that teachers like to look a year in advance. We're a little bit obsessive in our planning. So we like to get things well in advance and then check that we're sure that it's going to work for our children and have plenty of time to do that. So the first week, the first time we did it, we just kind of ran with it. We did it in the way that we expected it to be done, which was over kind of a week of watching a film every day. Just as you're saying. And one thing I would say is, I think there's absolutely a place for we do whole school assemblies, and that's fabulous, because when you have 400 people in a room, and you can really kind of get a feel for a collective understanding of something. But that makes it quite difficult if you want to have in-depth conversations at an age-appropriate way. So a big kind of launch, it's Empathy Week, and remember all of the fabulous things that we've done, and let's just revisit retrieval practice. So let's just keep going back over what we do and why we do it. But actually, I think the idea that we can then use the age appropriate films within, and we've become a blended assembly school. So sometimes we will have all children in the hall and we'll do a whole school assembly like that. And other times, actually, I will make age appropriate virtual assemblies that can be used anytime in that week by staff, so that they've got that flexibility if they've got something that the children are doing on the day I would normally do an assembly. Because we've managed to work in both of those ways, we can now be flexible with your way of working, and then we can use the films and thread them in. We do put that week kind of in the planner and aside. This is Empathy Week. And absolutely, we all need to know that is something we value and care about. But yes, I suspect that this year, for the first time, we might spread it out over a period of time as well. And because you can do a project if you want to, but you don't have to. You can just use the films and tie them into the work that you were going to do around PSHE, or if it's in your tutor time. So you can make it work for you like that, and not necessarily make it its own unique thing. We will, because it's something that we really rate and value, but we will, I think, thread it through a bit more.
And that's
what we've a little bit more time.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what we've had feedback from multiple schools. And that's why we now say the program starts in Empathy Week as a big kickoff, a big bang. But you watch the first film in the first week in Empathy Week, and then you watch over weeks. And actually, from research that we've done as well, that's going to lead to greater empathy development, because you're having these touch points over time, but also not, eating into that curriculum time, which we know is still so important. So it's amazing to hear how you're doing. I'm very excited to see the projects, and the kids. I loved visiting, and they were all coming up to me and empathy this and empathy that, and look at this and look at this. And it's great to see how it can change the behavior of students. And
in terms
really,
of what you were saying, there's behavior, as in there's learning behaviors, and there's the way that we interact with each other. But actually, we found a really positive difference in terms of behavior management, for want of a better word. So we've moved very much to a restorative way of working. And actually, when there's been a falling out or there's been an issue on the yard, we find ourselves having very much a conversation that involves empathy. And we very much say, let's just go back and imagine, how would you feel if that's the thing that had happened to you? So they're very kind of restorative. And then sanction wise, we're looking at what would be a restorative way to repair a relationship that's been broken now because of your actions. So actually that behavior sort of way of doing things also ties in totally with a kind of empathy focused way of doing things.
Amazing. Just before we finish, is there any questions from people that want to put them to us? Just came off of mute. Okay, so thank you so much, Paula, for being here. Thank you so much for your time. What a wonderful story you took us through, really, of how the school runs, not just using Empathy Week, but all of the other things that you're doing that other teachers can pick up on and use, whether you're in the UK or not. I think all of what you've said is relevant to building an inclusive school community that has empathy at the centre. And I'm sure that if there are any questions, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can put them in the comments, or you can send us a message, or we can probably connect you with Paula as well if there's a want to do that as well. But thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for being here, and hopefully see you during Empathy Week.
Yes.
See you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.